12 essential insights for emotional sobriety. I believe that this is going to be a definitive work in terms of defining emotional sobriety and laying out a path to achieve it. If you're stuck in recovery, or if you want to take the next step in your recovery, please read my book. This meeting has been focusing on the 12 steps and how they help us achieve emotional sobriety. We're going to be continuing that discussion tonight on step 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. But before I do, I always like to, for those people just joining us, kind of talk about what's happened in the preceding steps that have led us to this point in our development and in our recovery. So in step 1, we really got in touch with our limitations, our gaps in knowledge, the mistaken beliefs we have that created an unmanageable life. And that's the most important thing. When we're looking at achieving emotional sobriety, we need to really see how the way that we've been approaching our lives has really created an unmanageability. We've tried to control people, places, and situations and circumstances that are not within our ability to control. And that attempt to control these things and wrestle from life satisfaction created an unmanageable life. So we get in touch with that. It creates what I've described before, an existential crisis. Create some existential anxiety. I've got a problem. I don't know what I'm going to be able to do about it. I've just owned that there's things I'm powerless about. I'm not so sure how I can change this thing, this way I'm living that is creating so much havoc or wrecking so much havoc in my life. So that creates discharge of energy. We're in an existential crisis. And that's what happens with the steps. They create a charge, and then there's a discharge in the step that follows. That discharge comes along and is created by us having hope. We end up in step 2, now developing this idea that there is another way to show up in our lives. There's another way to live where our happiness is not contingent upon things going our way. That's a huge shift in our perspective, but that's where the hope comes from. There is another way to be. And so we embrace that. We see that. We see that happening in other people's lives. That resolves the existential crisis. So now there's the charge, there's the discharge of that pain, but now it builds up another charge, because for hope to make a difference in our lives, we have to take some kind of action. And that's what we do in step 3 now. So we build up this charge, there's hope. Now what am I going to do? Well, all right, we'll make a commitment to this new way of life. One where you're unhooking people and places and things in yourself from these expectations, from these shoulds, from these ought tos. And so now that discharges the hope, and now we build up another charge. I'm making a commitment. Now what do I do? How do I do this? Well, now then step 4 comes along. Well, take an inventory. Take a look at yourself. Get honest with yourself about how you've been living your life. So we sit down and we really take a look at ourselves, and we get honest about this emotional dependency and really see its tentacles in our life and the things that it's driven us to do. Bill called these things instincts gone awry. And we start to see what those instincts gone awry have done and how we've related to that. So now charge, discharge, the charge builds up. Okay, now I see these things. I'm seeing what's going on. I see where I've taken a veer in my life. What am I going to do? All right, we'll share it with somebody else, because this program is not done as a soliloquy. We cannot just have a conversation with ourselves. We have to be in relationship to others. And so now we turn to somebody and we maybe for the first time in our life have an experience of what an authentic relationship is really like. We find someone who can now be what I'd like to refer to as our enlightened witness. And we share these things with them, and we are seen, and we're seen as we are maybe for the first time in our life. We pull the facade down. We get naked. Now, if your sponsor asks you to get undressed and get naked, do not do that. I'm not talking about that. I am talking about naked in a spiritual sense. Okay?
Now you tell me. Now you tell me.
I left that piece out before. I don't want any hanky-panky out there. Knock that off now. Okay, so we share that. Now we build up another charge, right? God, I've shared this with someone else. Now I'm going to pivot. And that's what, we talked about step 6 being the pivot towards emotional sobriety. Now I get ready. We're entirely ready to have these defects of character removed, or as we rename them as these character defaults, these habitual ways that we've functioned, right? We want to remove. We sit, we look at these things. We get in touch with what function they played. We really start to understand the purpose that these things had in our life. Because if we're going to let go of them, we have to replace them. Like Thom said, we can't just say, stop thinking of a pink elephant. Thom will come in and say, think of a blue elephant. I mean, then the pink elephant's gone. And that's what we're doing here. And that's such an important thing. So now we're building up this charge. We're ready to have these defects of character removed. And now we humbly ask to have our shortcomings removed. We humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. So now we're going to drop in on John. John is in his mid-30s. He's been in recovery for about 5 years. And he has just worked step 6 and he's ready to work step 7. So we're going to tune into John's dialogue with God, because he's asking God to have these defects of character removed. This is John. Dear God, I am humbly asking you to remove my shortcomings. Please set me free from this bondage of self and my emotional dependencies and make me an instrument of thy will. I've readied myself in step 6, and now I am ready to have my defects of character removed. John sits quietly, as he's been told. Prayer is about talking to God, and meditation is about listening to God. So John sits quietly, as he usually does, and sees if some kind of idea or concept surfaces. Well, this day, something different happens. John unexpectedly hears a voice answer him. This is God talking to John. John, I hear you, and I am ready to remove your shortcomings. Now listen closely, John, because here's what you need to do. I want you to make a list of all the people you have harmed and become willing to make amends to them all, except when to do so would be inappropriate. Well, John's kind of shocked by that. Wasn't expecting that voice to boom in over the loudspeaker. And he goes, whoa, wait a minute here, God. Hold on. Now, that's not what I thought would happen or how you would respond. You were supposed to remove my shortcomings. There was no small print in that step that said that I needed to be involved in this process. I thought you were just going to take these things away. God answers that. Well, of course you thought that way, John. That's your basic problem. See, God is also a very good therapist, by the way, in this story. He's really doing a good job from a therapeutic standpoint. He says, that's your basic problem, expecting others to take care of your emotional well-being instead of standing on your own 2 feet. You've been doing that your whole life. Where did you get such an absurd idea? Well, I hope I haven't perpetuated that nonsense. So let me set the matter straight. I am not going to enable you any longer, any further. It's time to give up your immature childlike belief that someone is coming to save you. Save yourself. Well, clearly God has been attending Al-Anon meetings. My goodness, this is the message he got from Al-Anon. This is what John says. Well, hold on a minute. You know, if this reminds you of kind of Job's kind of discussion with God when he was challenged, there is a reason for that, right? Because when our relationship with God is personal, it's going to be the most helpful for you. So John says, this is what I expected to happen. Now, wait a minute. Now, hold on. I expect you to help me. And now you're telling me it's my job? Well, God answers that. He says, that's right, John. See, the problem is, John, you fused asking for help with abdicating responsibility for yourself. I'll say that again. God makes some really good points at times, and they are worth repeating. You see, you fused asking for help with abdicating responsibility for yourself. You see, John, it's not the same thing. When you ask for help, you are humbling yourself by admitting and acknowledging your limitations, your gaps in knowledge, and your mistakes. You are seeking direction to expand your possibilities and fill the gaps in your knowledge. This requires your full participation. Change is done to you, but not for you. Change is done to you, but not for you. Wow, that kind of resonated in John for a minute, and he's sitting there, he's starting to get a little bit more honest with himself. He goes, well, but you know, God, the truth of it is, it'd be much easier if you would just remove my shortcomings for me. I mean, you know, this is a pretty tall order that you're asking me to pull off here at this point. The idea of identifying all the people I have harmed and making amends to them all, well, that makes me feel quite uncomfortable. God responds. Well, there's another one of your basic flaws, John. God's a good therapist, I told you. There's another one of your basic flaws. See, you expect life to be easy and that you should always feel comfortable. There's nothing comfortable about growth. There's nothing comfortable about growth. Well, John says, well, I don't like reality. I'd really like to live in a utopia, God. God says, you do, huh, John? Is that what you think? Well, the utopia that you've tried to create in your life sure seems to be a dream of hell from the way I see it in terms of what's going on. You aren't happy. Look at the existence you've created. Your life is unmanageable. John says, I hate facing that fact. I like my fantasies better than reality. God says, no, you don't, John. You tell yourself that stuff, but you tell yourself a lot of things that aren't true. That is at the core of your problem. You see, you really don't want to grow up. You want to keep on manipulating others and even me to do your bidding. Well, I'm sick and tired of it. I'm not participating in this ruse any longer. I'm done. Well, now, wait a minute, God. John gets a little worried here. Oh, my God, God is abandoning me. What am I going to do? Oh, God, Christ, please don't do that. Wait a minute, God. I thought you were going to help me remove my shortcomings. God answers, John, I am helping you. It is time you realize that no one is coming. You need to save yourself instead of waiting for me or someone else to come around and save you from yourself. Good night, John. Good night, Moon. Good night, Sun. Good night, John. So, what this starts to introduce is really the process of change, doesn't it? This whole asking for help And that's where humility becomes so important, because it's only with humility that I become willing to go to any lengths to do what I need to do to start cleaning up my behavior and to remove my shortcomings. We can ask God for help, and we should, especially if we have a relationship with God and it's personal. But I think what God's going to do, if you have a God like I do, he's going to set before you all kinds of things that give you opportunities to clean that up. And the way that happens is by trouble. Now, I think we create that trouble in our lives. I think we create plenty of trouble in our lives. I think every bit of trouble we create is our answer to asking for help. But we have to unpack that trouble. We have to learn how to see the opportunity that is being set before us in whatever challenges life sets before us, whatever tasks are required of us in life, and that life brings to us. So I will now turn this over to my colleague, Thom, and Roger is also going to make some comments if he was able to get his phone working tonight.
Hey, John. You got me searching, man. I wrote a conversation one time about turning something over to God, and it was a mess. And I'm going to find it and send it to you, Alan. I love that. Is that from your new book?
No, I just wrote that this afternoon.
I knew you wrote it. I could tell you wrote it, but I thought, I wonder if that's in you, because I don't remember hearing it. I was going, have you changed it since I've seen it? It's like, I love it. Very good. Because I saw somebody in the chat saying, "What's he reading from?" And I started just to respond back as if I know how to respond to a chat, the Bible, but you don't recognize Alan, chapter 12, verse 1 through 3, the good book of Alan. So anyway, what it brings me to thinking about is my little nutshell that says God flunks no one, but he sure gives a lot of retests, and that's the thing. It's like God doesn't abandon, or whatever, and I'm not whatever version of God that is for people, but this is one of the things I think I have become more in tune with than ever before, coming back through all these steps with step 7. As I was looking back through the 12 and 12, and all these strivings, so many of them well-intentioned, our crippling handicap has been our lack of humility. Man, that idea is repeated over and over and over again in this short little chapter in 12 and 12 on step 7. And then he says, we had lacked the perspective to see that character building and spiritual values had to come first. I love the idea of character building as a daily practice. It's being the best version of ourselves that we can be every day. I was working with a client today. I'm going to say this and then I'll try to wrap this up. It's like I was working with a client today that has really worked hard and come a long way in lots of different ways from recovering from eating disorder, and a lot of the just the underlying stuff, the emotional sobriety stuff. But he was going through one of those periods of time with where I think that most of us experience, where it's like it just doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like the things are lining up. It's just not working right now. It has been, but it's not, and things are okay, but it's like it's just something's not right. And so we started talking about daily practice, and we went back and reviewed this idea that concepts themselves are useless unless they're translated into practice. And he had one of those experiences that I've had a zillion times. Is that because we had talked about that before, but sometimes you have somebody brings something up that we have talked about before, that before, that you've even done well with before, and it's a brand new concept again. It's like, it's amazing how many of these things we can have multiple insights with. It's like, and so we set about, just setting this up, and he talked about what, I asked him, I said, what's a good day like for you? What are you doing differently during a good day? And one of the things he just said, just immediately, is he said, I just accept responsibility and know that I'm in charge. And it made me think of that. I thought of that when you said the part about, the nobody's coming for you. It's like, it's, you do this, and that takes me to that metaphor of the lead sled dog thing. It's like, we have all kinds of support, but you're the lead sled dog, and if you don't stand up and move, none of the rest of us can pull. We're all dependent, we can help you if you help yourself. And so with that, so what we came up with is his affirmation. We wrote this down, and that's what he's been working with, is wake up every morning and say, I am in charge. And the thing I think about with what I'm in charge of with step 7 is the idea of asking. The action is asking in that case, and it's in your story more than that, but asking for these shortcomings to be removed is a daily practice. That we do that constantly, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. We keep doing that, and that is the practice of humility. And it's like, it is and to me, if I want to look at what character building is, I think humility. And I think they're very interrelated, but humility and integrity are the two words that come to my mind, and the idea that humility, and that in terms of my daily practice, integrity matters most is the little sign I have, in my office now, and integrity matters most. And that's my daily practice. And then the last thing that he has, I actually put it on a little piece of wood for him and put it in the mail to him because we were talking remotely today. And it just says, I'm in charge. And that's what it is. It's like, which I like the irony of that is we're asking this to be turned, we're asking these things to be removed. We're turning all this over. But the ultimate thing is we're also, and your story took me back to that. God brings it back to, you're still in charge. You have to decide, I can't do it for you. You have to do it. So thank you.
Thank you, Thom. Roger, would you unmute yourself and see if you've got anything you want to add to this?
Thank you, Thom. There's so much in that I think is helpful and spot on. 2 or 3 thoughts came to mind as you were reading your dialogue there, Al. I read a quote once attributed to Willie Nelson, and it described a situation where somebody asked Willie for his advice, and Willie thought for a moment and looked at the person and said, take my advice and do what you want. Okay, take my advice and do what you want. So instead of playing rescuer, instead of playing the all-knowing philosophical musical sage, right? Willie wasn't having it, right? At least in my fantasy about this dialogue, if it actually happened. He was just saying, take my advice, which is do whatever you really want to do, and then experience the consequences from that. So I always liked that. I thought that was funny, but it had a lot of depth too. I had the privilege of sitting in Nathaniel Brandon's therapy groups as a client for a number of years in the 70s and then again in the 80s. And he had that sign on his wall, as I've mentioned to you a number of times, and he's written about it in his book, "No one is coming." Right? He put that sign on his group room just to remind us of exactly what you're talking about tonight, Alan, that no matter what patterns of dependency we learned as kids, and no matter what very common and ordinary dependency needs we had as kids that weren't met, we're grown-ups now. And if I keep waiting for somebody to come and save me, in a way, the worst that can happen is someone will come and try, okay? Because I'm still not being asked to dig inside myself, right? I'm still not being asked to dig deep. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is I don't learn very well from my experience. I'm a really slow learner. And I can tend to be passive a lot of the time in the face of life's challenges. Really hard for me to see trouble as opportunity. really hard for me. Most of the time, trouble shows up in my life to see that as a doorway, right? Rather than a barrier. So, you know, I can play the blame game or I can play the passivity game. That's more mine. I love the life of the mind, right? I love, you know, sitting and meditating and thinking and reflecting, but don't ask me to actually take action, right? To address the problem or to change my situation. It's like, oh man, that'll make me really uncomfortable, right? That'll make me really uneasy or nervous. So I know those are all widely shared experiences, but they're certainly true of me. And it's been very helpful to me over the years, Alan, hearing you talk about, you know, life will give us the trouble that we need. Other people, situations we find ourselves in will give us exactly the trouble that we need if we will look into the trouble and let go of blaming ourselves. Maybe first and foremost, let go of blaming ourselves, let go of blaming others, and say, what is this trying to help me see? Or as you like to put it, what's missing that I need to have available to me so that I can make progress with this issue? Not perfectly, not finally, but some kind of progress with it. So thanks for that dialogue you created, Alan, for that theme for tonight, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Roger, and thank you, Thom, a lot. And next week, we're going to talk about how step 7 begins to make available that which was unavailable. So that's just a preview for next week. We're going to look at how step 7 is making available that which was unavailable to us in our lives.
One of the things that it's important for us to think about in our recovery is our relationship to our emotions. I know that depending on the way we're raised, certain feelings and certain emotions are going to be okay. They're going to be acceptable. And those that aren't are going to be pushed aside and disowned. Well, recovery is about recovering your lost true self. See, it's about achieving wholeness again. Because when I fragment myself, and when you fragmented yourself, you can't function well in life. You can't cope effectively with life. We need all of us to show up to be able to deal well with life. Well, emotional sobriety is about discovering new possibilities. Recovery is about recovering our lost true self and discovering new possibilities.